And we will have Jason give an overview of the bill. Jason?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Senate Bill 391 enacts new law with respect to landlord-tenant regulations. The law prohibits local ordinances by cities or counties from adopting and enforcing regulations on landlords. It would prohibit local ordinances and resolutions that, one, prohibit landlords from refusing to lease rental property to tenants based on the tenant's income consisting of financial assistance through the Housing Choice Voucher Program authorized by Section 8 of the United States Housing Act. So this is Section 8 housing, so it can't, local ordinances couldn't require landlords to accept Section 8 housing tenants. It also prohibits local ordinances that would restrict landlords' ability to use income qualifying methods, credit checks, eviction, property damage history, or criminal history when determining whether or not to rent property to a tenant. It also would prohibit local regulation that would place limits on the amount of the security deposit that a landlord could require for leasing property. And then finally, it would prohibit any regulation that would require a landlord to grant a right of first refusal to a tenant. The bill also has a provision nullifying any ordinance or resolution that's in effect on the effective date of this act that is prohibited under this legislation. This would go into effect on July 1st if enacted, and I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Thank you, Jason. Committee, any questions? Seeing none, I think we're in good shape. For our both proponents and opponents, in Fed and State, rather than limit any one person to a minute or 30 seconds, which I hate to do because I like to hear testimony, I do block timing so that we hear a full body discussion about the testimony. And so today, given the number of proponents and opponents, I think we'll do block timing of about 15 minutes. If you're toward the top of that time, just be aware that there might be some people who want to testify behind you, so allows them some time, and it generally tends to work pretty well. So we're going to start off with our proponent in-person testimony. First is Mark Toome from the Kansas Realtors. And Mark, welcome to Fed and State.
All right. Thank you, Chairman Thompson and members of the Senate Federal and State Affairs Committee. Thank you for the opportunity to provide proponent testimony on Senate Bill 391, legislation that would prevent cities from further interfering into private property rights of Kansas landlords. I am Mark Toome with Kansas Realtors. I represent more than 10,000 members involved in residential, agricultural, and commercial real estate in Kansas. And while many of our members are landlords, the reason realtors are involved in this issue and why we introduced similar legislation in the House as House Bill 2504, somehow your version is about 2 lines shorter than the one that we introduced over on the House side. But at its core, Senate Bill 391 ensures that cities and counties do not exceed their authority by regulating private rental decisions that have nothing to do with health and safety. Property ownership includes the right to decide how property is used, who is it rented to, and under what lawful terms. This legislation is similar to legislation passed in Missouri last year, and I think it restores while the legislation restores voluntary participation in housing assistance program, the legislation also prevents cities from complicating the landlord-tenant relationship in other ways. The city of Lawrence, to my knowledge, is the only city that would currently be impacted by the provisions included in this bill. They have an ordinance that makes source of income a protected class in the area of rental housing. However, while not currently in place in Kansas, there are a number of other things that are included in this bill that would be prevented because I think it's an overreach for local government to be involved in, and that includes things like limiting criminal background checks and credit worthiness checks, and I think that that's a real overreach. So I think cities should certainly stay in their lane. Before working for Kansas Realtors, I spent nearly 20 years working for local government associations, have a great respect for Kansas constitutional home rule and the ability of cities to be unique and innovative. But there are times also where the legislature says, not so fast, and that this is maybe out of bounds, and this maybe goes a little too far. And I think this is a situation where it is necessary for the legislature to preempt cities to prevent further regulating in this area. And for those reasons, we would support this legislation and be happy to stand for questions at the appropriate time.
Thank you, Mark, and committee will hold for questions until the block for the proponents is over. Next up is Stanley Weber, CEO and President of Tower Properties. Stanley, welcome to the committee.
Thanks for having me, and thanks for the time in front of the committee. You'll hear a lot of great testimony from people who understand the law and are used to standing before you. This is my first time ever in this situation, so it's very new. I apologize for any inefficiencies that I have. I'm a CEO and president of a public company called Tower Properties Company. Tower Properties Company has its home office, headquarters in Overland Park, Kansas. We choose to have assets anywhere we want that best perform for our shareholders and our employees. That's why I have a fiduciary responsibility to take care of. And so we need to invest where we want to and where it's the best to do business. Just happens as a proud Kansan who grew up in Wichita, went to school and got a couple degrees. My wife got a couple degrees in Kansas. All my kids did, and we've lived in Kansas our whole life. I'm happy to say and fortunate to say that our company has chosen to spend over 90% of our investment into assets in the state of Kansas. More than 50% of our assets are apartment complexes. Many of them are in Lawrence. We have direct experience about what's being spoken about here and what will be talked about in different terms when you listen to it from another side. For my side, start with some very simple things. HUD has some very good programs, including on the rental side, on lending side, but they're voluntary programs. They should stay voluntary programs, and you should make sure that that happens in the state of Kansas. If it happens in one place and you don't stop it, it's going to follow to others and quickly move on. What is the voluntary component? We have had development and put apartments into the state of Kansas. It costs a lot of money, and we had to make a lending choice. We could go to HUD and borrow money, or we could go to other places. It's everyone's choice. And it should be the same way with the residential side. What you're going to hear is some spinning of the words, but in Lawrence, the wording that is there, much like what was in Kansas City, Missouri, and in Kansas City, Missouri, they had the same type of law in place, and the legislature in the state of Missouri said, we're not going to allow that, and quickly changed it to make it statewide, like you have the opportunity here. What it says is that we cannot discriminate against them based upon a voucher program. But in Lawrence, we've been cited. We have been cited saying that we had a person who specifically was allowed to meet every criteria that's outside, all the fair criteria can be applied. We applied all that criteria and said, you can live here. And that person just came and said, no, I'm not signing a lease, and then went to Lawrence and had it cited that we discriminated against them because we would not accept the housing vouchers. The housing vouchers were like cash, right? They're real money if you go through the government program. We don't accept cash because we have internal controls and we don't want our employees to touch cash. We don't take certain credit cards. We choose our choice, voluntary, to be a part of the HUD program, to not accept those vouchers. But Lawrence said she could live here, but you said she couldn't live here because you wouldn't accept the vouchers. I said, yeah, we're not a part of the HUD program. And they said that we're improperly discriminating, that we have to join the HUD program. So when you hear others come up here and say the spinning of the words of what you read in Lawrence don't trigger you, domino effect, to join the HUD program that is voluntary. We might join the HUD program in 6 months, next year. It can happen. We might do a HUD loan. It's a choice that all businesses make, along with a lot of choices. And our customers that we care about are the tenants. 1,400 tenants spaces do we have, and we are almost always 100% full. Almost always, because we do the right thing. If you want companies like ours that invest millions of dollars in trying to provide housing and run businesses in the state of Kansas, then you will pass this, move it on, and make Kansas a place that we need to do business. If not, I have a fiduciary responsibility to say we've got to go with our money to other places. So that's the way I look at the choice. It's imposing on our federal rights by the Constitution, our Article 4 rights, etc. But if you hear people say that, it's no big deal in Lawrence, it is. They're coming after us right now because we will not accept as a payment a voucher. And that would trigger us down a program that is mandatory. It should not be. It should be voluntary, the way it was set up. Thank you.
Thanks, Stanley. And our our last in-person proponent is Ed Duskinia. I may have butchered that, Ed, and he's Associated Landlords of Kansas.
I won't bother to repeat everything they said. It's all true. But I will point out that we were asked where this law is in effect elsewhere. Is it a real problem? It's in Lawrence, Kansas, Kansas City, Missouri, where they just passed a state law to prohibit Missouri because they were losing too many landlords. They were getting out of business because it was affecting their bottom line to do this. Colorado, California, and New York, and in the previous testimony we just heard earlier, it was disclosed that several cities in Kansas have been discussing it at least, although not implementing it. So it is a problem. It's spreading, and it will affect people tremendously. We're actually trying to defend the tenants here because if we start losing landlords, there's not going to be housing choices. So if you would pass this bill, you would be helping the tenants in the process. So stand for questions.
Thank you, Ed. Committee, we have written-only proponent testimony from 8 different people, and that's in your packet or on the internal drive. And with that, we've gone about 8 minutes is all. They're very efficient with testimony, so we'll open up to questions for any of our proponents. Senator Faust-Godot.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question is for Stanley. You actually look like a movie star to me. And for your first time, you did a excellent job. I think when we speak from the heart and with passion, you know, it comes off so genuine and just perfect. And so just a quick question well, you know, I actually agree, you know, volunteer force, you know, they hold a different definition. And but the word volunteer, or how do you utilize that in other aspects of deciding if a tenant can move in? So I know back in a lot of people lost their apartments, homes, even during COVID because they couldn't work. And so, you know, some people, extenuating circumstances put them in that situation where maybe they were evicted. So what other type of programs do you offer, or not programs, but things that you might do to help that person rent from you? Thank you, Mr. Chairman, if that makes sense.
See what Stanley comes up with here.
You know it's an issue when I'm being called Stanley, so everybody calls me
Is it Stan?
I feel like
Okay.
that. I'm not sure if I can directly answer the question. We haven't had issues with eviction. We don't have issues with bad debts. We're 100% occupied almost all the time, year after year after year, so that people that live in the state of Kansas and choose to use our services, it's worked out very well. There's all kinds of nuances, though, that you talk about. Our leasing language can change at any time for everyone equally, but it's based upon the communication that you have back and forth. Any business you're in, you need to listen to your customers, and you need to have fair debate and come to a conclusion on price, quality, and everything else. That evolves over time, so we're constantly addressing all those issues. When you get the government involved and they start telling you what they are, they don't understand what the local issues are. They just have a blanket way of doing it over the United States, and it causes all kinds of hassles. It causes us a lot of money. We do tons of leasing activity. We turn apartments over in 10 days. If your lease ended at the end of January, by February 10th, we'd have someone new in. With a governmental program, you might have to wait 3 months. When are you going to actually get your money? All kinds of questions create additional costs. And when we have additional costs, guess where we have to ultimately push that? We have to push it to our customers, who are the tenants. So I have no agenda here. Politics is not my thing. I am just here to say, as a business person, I am a Kansan who loves the fact that I can say in front of my board and in my fiduciary responsibility, I am absolutely doing the right thing and having 90% of our $300 million worth of assets in the state of Kansas. And if we have it in another situation where we've got to move it someplace else where you don't want us to do business, that's fine. As a Kansan, I'm sad, but it's really your choice. And these things can bleed from one city to the next. And I think we have an easy blueprint. I'm not a politician. I don't understand. But Missouri seemed very simple. Kansas City, Missouri implemented a law like Lawrence did, and immediately landlords started leaving, and they had even more issues. But the legislature jumped in, just like you have the opportunity in this bill, and said, we're not going to allow that in the whole state because you're stepping and reducing our federal rights. It is a federal right, our Fourth Amendment right, that they should not have the right to mandate that we have to take their program. The HUD program is a voluntary program. I might join it next month. I don't know. Just give me the choice to run my business, and I think we have proof with our tenants that we're doing a good job.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Weber, but just a final quick question. So just so I'm clear on the legislation, the intent. So the local entities, local government, like I live in the city of Wichita, and they're doing certain things, they are doing certain things that we, the legislature, we aren't doing yet. So you're actually saying you want the locals, like my city of Wichita, not to tell you, businessmen, what to do, leave it to you to decide you want to volunteer or not. Is that?
Not at all. We want to be a part of the community. We want to work with the local community, the local government, and everything else. But we also, as citizens of the United States and companies that do business in the United States, have basic federal rights. And if you impose and reduce those rights, it changes the risk factor of what other rights are you going to take away from us, and do we stand there in the state of Kansas and say, as citizens of the United States, we thought we could do this, and now someone's saying we can't?
Senator Clifford?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just curious, are you seeking a legal solution for this? Is there any suit between the company and the city of Lawrence? Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Unfortunately, the question is yes. You're going to hear that this has been litigated. It has not been properly litigated because the group that tried to litigate it was not allowed standing. Standing means you have to have someone create action against you, I guess. They've created action against us, and we do have a federal court case against the city of Lawrence to say that they've stepped past our federal rights and that they are wrong. But the state of Missouri had the same thing occur. Someone went to the federal court against the city of Kansas City, Missouri, who did the same thing as Lawrence, and a preliminary injunction was set by that federal judge saying, this is probably inappropriate, let's go through the legal case. And before that happened, before the legal case was played out, the legislature stepped in quickly and changed the law. You would do a favor for every home provider, every person who's a landlord in this whole state. You would save a lot of hassle and time. And for me personally, my company a lot of money, because we're carrying the whole load for everybody on our shoulders to go show that Lawrence is incorrect and has gone too far. We're going to prove that in federal court, but it would be much better for everyone to be protected, and you guys take care of it like the state of Missouri legislature did, I believe. We're working on two different fronts. We'd love to work with you, but I'm ready to spend thousands and thousands of dollars to protect our right to do business in Lawrence under the federal rights that we have.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Thomas?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And really, anybody can address this, and I certainly would appreciate the opponents as well. So I'm sort of torn on this because when we have the laws on this, the residential, I forget the name of it, the Kansas Residential Lease Tenant, Landlord Tenant Act. Thank you. It's my first day. And so typically cities and municipalities are allowed to be more restrictive, but can't be less restrictive. And so I feel like we're at that crossroads where some towns are being more restrictive, and federal programs, I agree, they should be voluntary, not mandatory. But then on the flip side, now we're here where we need a statewide policy. And often it'll give me pause to sit back and go, cities are choosing maybe to be more restrictive. And while it's not right, sometimes if the legislature gets involved, it might actually long-term be a mistake, because now we're passing statewide policy when it should be oftentimes a local issue. And so that's kind of where I'm struggling with this bill, because I agree wholeheartedly, it should be voluntary, they shouldn't make it mandatory. the things you're talking about. At the same time, states getting involved in every local issue can oftentimes lead to problems down the road. So just sharing that, and any way you can ease my concern with that would be helpful, because I get what you're saying, and I agree with you wholeheartedly. These kinds of pieces of legislation sometimes give me a little bit of pause, is all I'm saying.
Any of the conferees on that?
Mark Toom with Kansas Realtors. I think it's a home rule argument, and home rule does allow the legislature to pass things that essentially preempt. And I think you've seen the examples of when cities have gone and regulated in a space that's just a little too far. And I think that is why we brought this legislation, is because I think that this is somewhat aggressive in the form of what they're doing. And to make it so that it is truly a voluntary program, we have to preempt the city of Lawrence. And in doing that, I think that there's other things in this that would make for, I think too much of an aggressive regulation of landlords.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, if I may. Okay, and I agree with that. So my follow-up question is, if this does go to court and the court sides with you, with the concerns of the proponents, is the bill necessary now that precedent has been set, or?
I think the bill is necessary, because I think this court case is covering, I think, a source of income discrimination argument. There are other components in here that we are preempting local governments that we've seen in other jurisdictions, the criminal background checks, the credit, those kinds of things that I think that cities should not be preventing that information from mom and pop or any landlord. And so I think that still is an important piece of policy.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Francisco and then Senator Gossage.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And my question was for Mr. Weber. And thank you. You described the Section 8 vouchers as cash, saying that this was someone paying their income in cash. Can you explain that? I have a Section 8 property and my payment never comes in cash.
I may not describe this right, but if you had $1,000 for simplicity that was owed to rent this space, and a person provided a Section 8 voucher, let's say, that said it's worth $500, they would pay you $500 in money, not necessarily cash, but with a check or ACH payment, and the other $500 gets turned into money by going back through the federal government and the local authority that they provide there to turn that $500 of rent due into cash. So the way I describe it, you get $1,000 from a Section 8 renter, you get $500 from them and $500 from the government, and someone else might next door pay $1,000 in their own payment because they have no Section 8 vouchers. So that to me, it is a payment methodology. That's what we got caught on. I just know what happened in Lawrence. I don't normally come up here and say I need to talk before the state legislature or committees, but they have said we've done something wrong by saying we don't have a Section 8 program. We voluntarily did not take that program. So you can pay with a check, you can pay with a Visa credit card. We'd be glad to have you move in tomorrow. They met every criteria that we could ever ask that's legitimate, fair, and they were going to move in and they chose not to. Instead, they went to Lawrence and came after us and said, we may be in line for fines and everything else if we don't agree to their provisions, which is you must accept these vouchers, but you can't accept the vouchers without then joining the program. Otherwise, you might get a piece of paper and throw it on the floor and you've lost $500. You have to join the program. The dominoes start falling. So they're mandating that I have to be a part of a voluntary program. No one mandates, is Lawrence going to mandate that I have to borrow my money from HUD and I can't go to the local bank and borrow it? I can borrow from HUD. It's a great decision. A lot of people do. We choose not to because we don't want the government restrictions and extra costs that come with a HUD loan, but it's a very fair program. It's a great program, and so is the residential program for leasing. But it's a voluntary program according to federal laws, and we would be glad to do it if it was more palatable or a way that we liked it. Johnson County, Kansas, has done a good thing and said it's voluntary in Johnson County. so have not imposed on my rights, but they said, hey, look at these extra things that we will do with you if you join the program. Guess what happened? They got more people in Johnson County to join the program because they said it's voluntary, but this is a way that we would like it to be better for the local community. That's what local communities should have the absolute right to do. They can rule the way they want and meet the criteria of their citizens any way they want, but they can't step on the federal laws to do it. That's the big difference. We're getting cited. Someone came after us saying we did something wrong, when all we said is we don't accept MasterCard. We don't accept cash. If you're a billionaire and you walk in with cash, we are not accepting cash. We do not want that for internal control purposes, and we don't accept these vouchers. To me, it's just a payment issue that we've now been called on and pulled into and embroiled in a whole different thing.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just concerned about the describing it as cash, because the voucher is a program where you get an electronic transfer
A
of
reimbursement,
funds.
basically.
So the tenant doesn't have the voucher. It's called a voucher program. That wasn't a question.
Senator Gossage.
Yes, just a quick question, because I would like to hear what the opponents have to say. But this is a very short bill, and I've never rented a property. I know my parents did. But I'm trying to understand, so we keep referring to Lawrence because you said it's basically the only city in Kansas that's requiring this. Is that correct?
Yes, we had testimony just before this for House Bill 2504, which is much like your bill. So we've gone through a lot of this, so I apologize if you're not getting some of the background.
No.
And I don't need to say it's only Lawrence, but that's what you're going to hear, that it's only in Lawrence, it's only that issue, let them do what they want to do, it doesn't go anywhere else. But that is very naive from your perspective to say what happens in Lawrence suddenly moves over. And we're just a company that if you don't want us and others to be housing providers in the state of Kansas, that's fine. I mean,
So
I
where's
can
the-
move my assets very easily.
I apologize. Was the property that was in question that you said this tenant chose not to rent through you, was that located in Lawrence, or where was this property?
Yes, because this is the only place where they could utilize that kind of overreach, and they did in Lawrence. So I didn't know anything about the Lawrence law. We were just doing business every day like normal. We are 100%, close to 100% occupied year after year after year in the Lawrence area and others in the state of Kansas. It has never been a problem. We work well with our tenants. Then all of a sudden, we have a person say, I'm going to pay with Section 8 vouchers. Our staff there said, we don't accept Section 8 vouchers, just as if they said, I can't take your cash if you walked in. It's a very simple thing to them, and all of a sudden, we get cited by Lawrence, and now we're in trouble and maybe getting fined and everything else. So our response had to be to go to federal court and to stop this process for our company. It actually is going to benefit everybody, but it's stopping it here. Just the same thing that happened in Kansas City, Missouri, when they overreached. They went to the federal court. The federal court started going down the side of saying this needs to go on further in court, but it looks like it's improper. And it all ended because the legislature stepped up and said, we want you to do business in our state. We don't want Kansas City, Missouri to go rogue.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Murphy.
Thank you, Chair. So just a question. So if you were to take the voucher, does that automatically put you in the Section 8 program?
Yes, you have to. The only way that you can
Right.
turn that into a rental payment is you have to join the HUD program.
And then does that require you to do certain things to be, as
Yeah,
far as
all
your
kinds of things
properties
that
and-
impose the rights that they don't have. They have the right to look at leases of other people to make sure that their lease, the amount you're charging, et cetera, is consistent with other people. If they think it's appropriate, they get to go into our records. Any records that they think are appropriate to look at, they get the right to look at. And they oftentimes take a lot of time to turn over, a 10-day turnover for us to produce income by unit. It may take 3 months. You have to sign a contract with every single person who comes in as a Section 8, every single one. We're processing 1,400 all the time in a speedy way with only 11 people in our corporate office, a very efficient way. Our biggest costs are property taxes, insurance costs going out of control. Those are the things we have to pass on to our tenants. If they want to start passing on corporate costs and lack of renting in the space because we wait for this Section 8, and their leases are dictated to you. You must take the lease that they have in Section 8, and we don't get a say. That's not part of our process, and that's not the lease that we use. So there's all kinds of issues. Just like if you take a HUD loan, you voluntarily choose to deal with what HUD's restrictions are. That's fine. But we're being forced to not be able to make that decision. We're being forced to not discuss things with our tenant between us and them, which has been a very cordial, positive relationship.
And that was my point, was the fact that it's more than just a voucher payment. There's a lot more to it, so.
We need to move on to our opponent testimony, but we do have neutral written testimony, you might know. Thank you very much, Mr. Weber. Appreciate it very much. Neutral written testimony by Cole Schneiders, and then opponent in-person testimony. Again, we'll give a 15-minute block. We'll start off with Christy Baumann from the United Community Services. Christy.
Good morning, Chair, members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today in opposition to SB 391. My name is Christy Boffman. I'm Executive Director for United Community Services of Johnson County. And I'm also a small mom and pop landlord. So I'm coming to you today wearing both hats as I present my testimony. This affects both the people that UCS represents, but it also affects people like me who provide housing in our community. At UCS, we work every day with local governments, service providers, and residents to understand what's really happening in our housing system. We use data, community voices, and collaboration to help keep Kansans housed across the state. Now, as a landlord, I experience that system on a very personal level. My rental property is not part of a corporate portfolio. It's part of my family's financial future, and it's part of our neighborhood. I know my tenants. I see them in the grocery store. If something goes wrong in the apartment, I don't file a ticket. My husband and I show up with our tools and our materials. And for me, that's why SB 391 is a concern. I feel like it takes decisions away from local communities and replaces them with a one-size-fits-all mandate across the state. It assumes that all landlords operate in the same way, and that's just not true. More and more in the state of Kansas, we see that rental properties are owned by large out-of-state corporate investors, and they use automated systems and pricing software. Research shows us that these corporate owners evict more often, they defer maintenance, and they treat housing as an instrument instead of a home. Small landlords like myself and my husband operate differently. We are invested in our neighborhoods and our communities and the people who live in them. This bill protects corporate practices while stripping communities of their ability to respond when harm occurs. These protections for me as a landlord, I don't see them as threats. I see them as tools that help stabilize housing and prevent conflict. For me, when rules are clear and fair, everybody benefits, landlords and tenants alike. I put on my UCS hat now. At the same time, Kansas faces a serious housing shortage. Since 2018, rents have increased 25% across the state, and we've lost 35% of all rentals that go below $1,000 a month. Housing needs vary dramatically across the state, and local governments need flexibility to respond in their own market conditions and their own voter priorities. What is happening in Overland Park, where I live, is very different from what might be happening in Pittsburgh or Garden City, and as community members, we need to be able to respond in our own communities. 391 removes that flexibility. It tells communities that even when problems are clear and residents are asking for solutions, they're not allowed to act. Now, as the head of UCS, I see how housing instability ripples through families, schools, employers, and health systems. And as a small landlord, I see how clear local fair policies help sustain healthy rental relationships. So for these reasons, both hats, I urge you to oppose 391 and preserve local control over housing policy. And I often tell people that data is my love language, and I know that we've been talking a lot about housing choice vouchers and Section 8, and I want to just be clear, we're not talking about thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of people using vouchers. Across the state of Kansas, we're talking about barely over 11,000 people using vouchers. So just to be clear in terms of like the total number of people that we're talking about when we start talking about folks who are using vouchers. So happy to answer any questions when they come up. Thank you.
Thanks, Christie. We'll hold for questions for the opponents. She did not stay on. So our next, Christy McMurphy dropped off. She was on WebEx. So she was our next opponent in person testimony. So we'll skip over and go to Spencer Duncan from the League of Kansas Municipalities. Spencer.
Chair, Spencer Duncan, League of Kansas Municipalities, Mayor of Topeka, and I guess I collect some rent from some folks, so I guess that makes me a landlord for whatever that's worth. Two very quick points. It's not naive for you to consider constitutional home rule. I know you hear me say that a lot, but it's not statutory home rule. It's constitutional home rule. And because of that, you have a higher threshold when you consider preemption bills. And that threshold includes, is this a widespread problem across the state of Kansas that has elevated itself to needing to be addressed by this Kansas legislature? You have heard, Lawrence is it, folks. Yes, there have been other cities that have considered it. They voted it down. That's how the process is supposed to work, and it's playing out the way it's supposed to work. So I know you hear me say it a lot, but I feel I have that responsibility to once again remind you of that constitutional threshold. The second piece is government assistance is legal income. And by putting this into law, I want you to consider what you are codifying into law as the distinction between this type of income and other income. If you choose to move forward with this, the request we would have is either to strike Section 1 or to amend it to address the real issue, which, if at the end of the day it's Section 8 vouchers, well, not my best thing I think you should do, but make that nuance within this bill, because there are other programs that people use that are very different from this. In fact, cities get federal dollars, and then they distribute some of those funds differently, not through the Section 8 program. The Lawrence law does not mandate, and I understand the concern, but it only really requires that you can't use income as the loan disqualifier. All that other stuff would still apply. If you have issues with past landlords, a criminal, your credit checks aren't right. So the Lawrence law just wanted to say you can't just use the fact that someone gets any sort of government assistance as the sole disqualifier. So I think that's a very important distinction to make, and that should be reflected in the law that you pass out so that that protection continues to address the issue of the landlords, but also continues to protect citizens from being discriminated based just on the fact that they get some kind of government assistance. That's all I got for you, Chair.
Thank you, Spencer.
Thank you.
Leah Roslin of City of Lawrence is our final in-person opponent. Leah, hopefully I didn't butcher your last name.
Perfect, you got it exactly right. Good morning, Chairman and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Leah Roslin, and I'm the Housing Administrator for the City of Lawrence. I'm here today in opposition to SB 391. At its core, this bill removes local government's ability, Lawrence's ability, to address housing challenges that are real, documented, and specific to our community. Lawrence has a persistent shortage of affordable rental housing. 55% of our residents are renters. We have a 2% vacancy rate in rental housing, and rising housing costs are putting pressure on individual households, neighborhoods, and our schools. In response, Lawrence has adopted targeted and measured policies designed to reduce barriers to housing access while still preserving landlords' ability to screen tenants and manage their properties responsibly. One example is our source of income discrimination ordinance. This policy does not require landlords to lower standards, prohibit background checks or credit checks, accept unqualified tenants, or limit rents. It simply says that lawful sources of rent payment, such as housing choice vouchers, cannot be categorically excluded. Importantly, this ordinance has been challenged twice, and most recently in May of 2025, the Kansas Court of Appeals affirmed that it is a lawful exercise of local control. SB 391 would override that settled law, disrupting policies already confirmed by the courts. Removing this authority threatens the stability of families, seniors, veterans, forcing them to navigate a rental market without protections that their community has carefully put in place. Housing markets vary widely across Kansas. A one-size-fits-all approach ignores these differences and prevents communities from responding to problems that they know best. Lawrence has demonstrated that local governments can create targeted lawful policies that increase housing stability while respecting landlord rights. For these reasons, the City of Lawrence respectfully urges the committee to oppose SB 391 and to preserve local government's ability to respond to our own housing needs within our own communities. Thank you so much for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Leah. Committee, we have 9 written opponents on the bill, and that is available on the internal drive for you to look at. And at this time, we will open to questions for any of the opponents. Senator Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Leah, would you mind coming back up, please? Honestly, I'm not convinced here, and so I want your help on this. So the way I'm reading this bill is if we pass this bill, you can't restrict a landlord from saying we're not going to lease based off this guideline about food stamps. If we don't pass this bill, cities are then able to say, Mr. Landlord, you do have to accept this. So playing devil's advocate, what it sounds like was done in Lawrence based off proponent testimony is you are restricting the landlord by saying you have to accept this even though it's a volunteer federal program. And so this bill says otherwise. So kind of help me fill in the gap there because I don't feel like I'm bought into that this restricts anybody other than the landlords, frankly.
Lawrence's policy does not require that landlords participate in the housing choice voucher program. It simply says that you cannot discriminate or prohibit an otherwise qualified tenant based on their lawful source of income. In the same way that policy, local, federal, state policy says that you can't disqualify tenants for other protected factors such as race. This local policy protects our community members who rely on housing choice vouchers. In some quick history, so our government used to build public housing. That was how we provided affordable housing for low-income households. That policy shifted to giving housing choice vouchers that would rely on landlords and local communities to provide housing, but that also requires that there's housing available that accepts those vouchers.
If I may. So if I'm a landlord, and yes, this is hypothetical, but sometimes that's how we operate. If I say I will only accept cash or Section 8, I don't want to take credit cards or checks, isn't that my right as a landlord?
2 Kansas courts have upheld the lawfulness of Lawrence policy.
I just feel like the landlords are being restricted, and by not having this bill, they're being forced to accept certain pieces. And I just, as a capitalist, it's tough for me to wrap my head around that. But I appreciate your opinion. I appreciate the objections, and certainly thank you for being here, and appreciate the conversation.
Any other questions for the opponents? Senator Francisco.
Thank you, and Ms. Roslin, I'll just have you come get your exercise. I'm assuming that you have worked with some of the landlords in Lawrence. I was surprised to hear someone say that the HUD program would require you to have their lease. That has not been my experience. Do you have any knowledge about that, or?
Yeah, that is not the case. Landlords still can set their own lease, can have background checks, can set the standards and terms of their leases. It does not require that the landlords utilize a HUD lease or any local standardized lease.
And for my follow-up, I was surprised also. I'm a small landlord, and we turn over our properties in 24 hours. So somebody has to be out by noon on one day, someone can move in at noon the next. So have you heard any experiences of long time waits that someone, if they have been involved with the HUD program, if they're off the HUD program, then that property is immediately goes back to the landlord for their...
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as I mentioned earlier, the vacancy rate in Lawrence is 2%, which means that there is much more of a demand for housing than there is supply. Landlords have an ample choice in who to accept as tenants. This local policy simply says that a lawful source of income cannot be used to discriminate an otherwise qualified tenant. And I must mention too that Lawrence also has programs that work with landlords to provide incentives to guarantee that if there's any harm done to the units, that we provide financing and funds to help recover costs. So we are also working very much in partnership with landlords.
Senator Clifford.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Please stay up. Yeah, I've read the written testimony from the mayor that appears under your name. It just seems like you're presenting a landlord with a catch-22 when you say you don't force them to accept any particular type of lease, yet you're forcing them to take a type of payment which forces them to take a type of lease. So I don't know how the courts view this, and evidently there's ongoing litigation, but you just said that, so I wonder how do you resolve that from a government standpoint or personal standpoint?
Well, again, the policy simply prohibits discrimination based on a lawful source of income. It does not require participation in any particular type of lease. Again, it does not limit landlords' ability to set their own lease standards. It simply says that one particular source of income cannot be used to disqualify otherwise qualified tenants.
Follow up, Mr. Chairman? Again, I'm not a lawyer, I'm a physician, but therein is the rub. By requiring a certain form of payment, you're requiring a certain form of a lease. So
it doesn't require a certain form of lease. It just compels the landlord to accept a certain type of payment.
which requires them to have a certain type of lease.
It does not change the lease standards. Maybe I'm not understanding what.
I'll just defer to the courts on it. Thank you for your answer. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions? Senator Gossage.
Just to follow up on the question from Senator Clifford, so it does sound, I mean, I can appreciate, it just says this, but yet for them to accept the payment, they would have to participate in the HUD program, correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will say, and my understanding is that if you do participate in the HUD program, you have to have your property inspected. And that is also required for any other property in Lawrence. I see you nodding.
That is correct.
So in the case for Lawrence, the fact that you go through a HUD inspection for this lease takes you out of the requirement for going through a city inspection and actually saves you the cost of the city inspection.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you.
Senator Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think it's important to point out when we talk about incentives and certain things that we grant for landlords and folks to do, oftentimes landlords, kind of like when we talk about homeschools, they don't want the government involved. They want the free market to run its course. They want to lease, they want to collect their rent, and they don't want to be bogged down with potential government, I don't want to say handouts, but incentives that could then come with strings attached. And I think that's another crux of the argument that's given me a little heartburn about some of this as well.
Senator Murphy.
Thank you, Chair. And I just did a quick search here and been talking about like leases and stuff like that. According to HUD, yes, they do have specific lease requirements for landlords participating in its assistance programs.
And just to be, Senator Clifford.
Do we still have time for questions?
Just a couple, a
I want
minute
to
or two,
pivot
yeah.
back to Mr. Weber. Would you allow that? Or I can talk to him off channel.
Why don't we talk to him,
Thank you.
to
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
discuss with, just a quick reminder on constitutional home rule. As long as we apply it evenly to all cities, then we have that right to do that as a state, because that's what we do. In this case, to address a problem of a specific locality or potentially the spreading of this activity to other localities, we would have to apply it evenly across the state so as not to violate the home rule issue, just as a point of clarity. Any further discussion on this? Seeing none, thank you, committee. That will close the hearing on Senate Bill 391. We have no meeting tomorrow. We have 4 bills we're hearing next week, actually 5, Monday through Friday, or Monday through Thursday. Oh, I had a bill introduction I needed to get in very quickly, since we didn't have a quorum at the beginning, and that is 26 RS 2898. That has to do with Medical Freedom Act. And any questions or objections to introduction of that bill? Seeing none, that bill is introduced. Are there other bill introductions? Oh, yes, come on up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Randy Evans with the Kansas Racing and Gaming Commission, and we would like to introduce 26 RS 2483, an act concerning administrative rules and regulations relating to sports wagering and the adoption of certain rules involving sports wagering.
Very good. Committee, any questions or objections to introduction of that bill? Seeing none, that bill is introduced. Thank you, sir. Any further bill introductions? Seeing none, we are done for today. Committee, thank you for your hard work and consideration. We are adjourned.